Hey everybody, hope you're doing well out there. As you probably noticed, I'm not there, unfortunately. Exposure to COVID has got me out for this week. So I'm hoping to be back by next Tuesday and back to normal. But hopefully things are going all right without me there this week. So today we're going to be going through some notes on imperialism. Talking about what imperialism is and what motivated European empires like the British, the French, and the Spanish to embark upon policies of imperialism. And then we're going to talk about the different types of imperialism and be able to associate those with these different empires. So let's go ahead and get into this. You should have your digital notebook open in another tab and have it open to part 3. As this is on Edpuzzle, as we go through, some questions are going to pop up. So make sure you answer those as we go. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so first off, let's start with a little bit of a review from before we left on break. Specifically, why did Europeans begin exploring? And if you remember, this all goes back to trade networks, most notably the Silk Road. So the Silk Road is the major trade route that connected Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. This wasn't like an actual road, but instead a collection of trade routes which connected these different areas and allowed these three major regions to exchange goods with one another. Right in the center of that exchange is the city of Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire, or what is the Eastern Roman Empire. And it acts as a hub or a link between Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. Constantinople is largely considered an unconquerable city, even though it had been attacked several times by Muslim empires, most notably the Ottoman Turks. It had not fallen. That is until the year 1453, when the Ottoman Empire is able to conquer the city, thus exterminating the Byzantine Empire. They renamed the city to Istanbul and basically cut off trade to Europeans in one way or another. At one point, trade is literally cut off. At other points, trade becomes more expensive through the issuing of tariffs. In other words, Europeans are going to have to pay higher taxes to be able to trade through the city of Istanbul in order to reach the Middle East and most notably Asia. So, partially motivated by a desire not to pay these tariffs, probably more motivated by a desire not to interact with the Ottomans and a Muslim empire, Europeans want to find a new route to Asia. Most notably, they're going to turn to sea travel to try and find that route. We talked about how the Portuguese kind of led the way in terms of finding a route around Africa to get to India, and it is the Spanish that fund the voyages of Christopher Columbus in 1492 to try and sail west to find a route around the world to reach Asia, and Columbus inadvertently runs into the Americas by doing this. So, Europeans discover the Americas. What happens from here? Well, Europeans embark on a process or policy known as imperialism. Imperialism is the process through which a country attempts to control the economy, politics, and culture of another place or group. This process most often happens when a larger and or stronger group looks to exploit or take advantage of a smaller, less powerful, and or less advanced group or place. Imperialism is not a new thing at this point in history. It is something that had been embarked upon for millennia. If you remember back to when we talked about the Roman Empire, the final period of Roman history is known as the imperial period, when Rome becomes an empire, and they start really expanding and conquering new territory, often territory controlled by barbarian tribes who are less advanced or less powerful than the Romans themselves. So this is not a new thing. Imperialism can be direct or indirect. When we say direct, we mean that a country directly invades or occupies a territory and looks to control the land or people that are there. Indirect means that a country looks to influence the actions of a specific territory or group without directly occupying the place they reside. So, through the threat of force or through other means, they try to dictate the actions that people take. European imperialism in the Americas was of a direct nature. And so it's of a direct nature in the sense that European powers literally occupy parts of America. They are going to sail over across the Atlantic and occupy parts of America and look to directly control or directly interact with the inhabitants who are there, those being the different Native American groups, tribes, and empires. So what are these motivations for imperialism? Fourfold. We talked about the 3 Gs before we left for break. You guys are going to look a little bit more into that tomorrow as well. Those 3 Gs are gold, God, and glory. But if we want to break it down into different categories, there are economic motivations, which is access to certain goods, materials, and resources. There are military motivations, access to important military locations for defense or attack. There are social motivations, which are settling in new places that can provide new opportunities for people, like work or the opportunity to move up in social class. And there are cultural motivations for imperialism, spreading things like language or religion to new people. For Europeans, economic, social, and cultural are the 3 motivators early on. Military will become more of an important one after occupation of the Americas has settled in for, a century or two. At that point, important military bases or points will become more important to Europeans. So when we talk about this direct imperialism, it took one of 3 forms in the Americas. The first is known as conquest. Conquest is when one group looks to forcefully take control of a given territory from another group. This form was primarily used by the Spanish, notably in the area that today would be South America or Central America. Excuse me, my kid's knocking on the door. So, for example, civilizations such as the Aztecs were conquered. And the reason for this was to attempt to acquire the gold that existed within the territory that they occupied. So instead of the Aztecs being allowed to exist and control themselves, they are conquered and ruled by the Spanish directly. A second form of imperialism is known as contact. This is when one group is primarily concerned with trade as the main form of interaction with people in a newly encountered territory. So in other words, less with actually occupying and controlling and taking over the territory that these people have, and more with direct trade to get access to the resources that they have. This does not necessarily mean that this form of imperialism doesn't involve force or the acquisition of territory at times. It's just that forming economic relationships with indigenous people is the primary goal. In other words, using force when necessary, taking territory when necessary, but trying to foster more peaceful or amicable relationships with natives when possible. This form of imperialism was primarily employed by the French in territories that now make up parts of modern-day Canada and the southern United States, such as Louisiana, or what will make up what will be known as Louisiana Territory. The third form of direct imperialism is known as colonization. Colonization or colonialism is the most developed form of direct imperialism. The invading country looks to exploit resources and materials while directly controlling or eliminating the original population that lived there, often using brutal methods to do so. This leads to the gradual replacement of indigenous populations. And when we say indigenous, what we mean there is that the people that originate from that place, they're the ones that originally lived there. So in other words, colonization is a more developed form of imperialism in the sense that whereas conquest might look to take over a region and allow the people that are there to remain, in other words, they'll continue to live there, they won't have political power, that political power will rest with the people that conquered that place. Colonialism or colonization looks to actively replace or eliminate the people that live in a given area that is taken over. This form of imperialism is primarily employed by the English in the 13 colonies that would eventually form the United States. So this form of imperialism is the one that we are most interested in and the one that we will explore the most through the course of this unit as well as the next one. So that kind of brings us to the end here of our look at the different forms of imperialism. Going forward, we're going to look again a little bit more in depth of the motivations for explorers and people that came over to the Americas before we start to move into looking at the three different empires that come to occupy the Americas and the different way in which those empires looked and the different ways in which they functioned in the Americas. And again, that's the English, the British, and the French. And then from there, we're going to get into looking at specifically the Spanish and Christopher Columbus. Look at the immediate impact of when Columbus lands in the Caribbean in an area known as Hispaniola and the impact that he has and who is to blame for that impact, specifically the bloodshed and death that happens because of Spanish occupation of that area. So, let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to email me or reach out. Hope you guys are doing well, and hopefully I get to see you soon. Bye.